Imagine a single missile hitting a cargo ship thousands of miles away in the Red Sea. I mean, before the smoke even clears, the price of your commute to work just went up.
And a multi-billion-dollar national infrastructure plan in Southeast Asia is, well, suddenly on the verge of total collapse.
Welcome to the Clara and Horatio Daily World Brief, available at claraandhoratio.com. Today is July 25, 2026, and we are examining the terrifying speed of global choke points.
Because when a physical transit route or a diplomatic channel suddenly closes, those consequences, they do not stay contained.
No, they travel through the global economy instantly. It translates distant military decisions into immediate civic and financial realities for households everywhere.
And we are seeing the sheer speed of those consequences play out across the Middle East right now.
Yeah.
So the Iran-backed Houthis have claimed a missile attack on Jazan, Saudi Arabia. This came as a direct retaliation following Saudi airstrikes on Hodeidah earlier this week.
While at the same time, in the Gulf of Oman, the U.S. military fired on and disabled a commercial tanker that was attempting to evade the American blockade on Iranian ports.
Which is critical because even though there's a temporary pause in direct U.S. and Iran strikes for the first time in 2 weeks, the geographic realities for global trade remain severe. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed to secure transit.
And the Red Sea route is severely restricted. The public consequence of severing those routes hits wallets before it even hits the evening news.
Definitely. Brent crude oil broke $100 a barrel earlier this week, settling slightly around $96.
Translating that directly to the pump, average gas prices in the U.S. hit $4.09 a gallon. Over in Germany, petrol climbed to €2.15 a liter. But to understand the true civic stakes of this choke point shockwave, we have to look at Indonesia.
Right, because Southeast Asia's largest economy relies heavily on imported fuel. The Hormuz closure has essentially blown a massive hole in their national budget because they use fuel subsidies.
The Indonesian government buys fuel at that surging global price, but sells it to citizens at a fixed low price to prevent unrest.
And that difference just skyrocketed. It requires an extra $6 billion simply to keep domestic prices stable. The fallout for Jakarta is compounding rapidly. The Indonesian rupiah has plunged 8% to record lows against the U.S. dollar.
Meaning everything Indonesia imports just became 8% more expensive literally overnight.
Which triggers foreign investors to pull nearly $4 billion out of Indonesian assets. This marks the largest sell-off since just before the Asian financial crisis in the late 90s.
So this immediate financial pressure heavily threatens the new president, Prabowo Subianto.
It does. During his campaign, he promised to raise economic growth to 8% by launching a new sovereign wealth fund to manage assets worth around $900 billion. Now, agencies like MSCI and S&P Global Ratings are issuing warnings that Indonesia risks being downgraded from an emerging market to a frontier economy.
Wait, let me stop you there. For someone listening who does not spend their time following global finance, what is the practical mechanical difference between an emerging market and a frontier economy? Why does that label change matter so much?
Well, an emerging market implies a certain level of structural stability and transparency. Think of it as a developing country that has built reliable financial plumbing.
So institutional investors, like massive global pension funds, are allowed to park their money there.
Exactly. But a frontier economy, on the other hand, implies highly volatile, untested waters. And the mechanics are brutal. If S&P triggers that downgrade, institutional investors do not sit around having a committee meeting about whether to stay.
Their internal rules mandate that they cannot hold frontier assets.
The downgrade triggers automatic, algorithmic sell-offs. The capital simply vanishes.
Looking at Indonesia's situation, it feels remarkably similar to a household whose entire budget is derailed by a sudden spike in the heating bill. You have plans to renovate the kitchen or, send a kid to college.
But when the baseline cost of simply keeping the house warm triples overnight,
you are forced to put all those life plans on hold just to survive the winter. Indonesia planned for an era of ambitious expansion, and instead, they're spending billions merely treading water.
I want to add a layer to that household budget comparison, though, because governments differ from households in one crucial way. They carry national debt.
Indonesia's debt-to-GDP ratio sits at roughly 41%, which is technically lower than many of its peers.
But the vulnerability lies entirely in the cost of servicing that debt. Close to a quarter of all tax receipts in 2026 are projected to go toward interest payments alone. When those international credit ratings drop, borrowing costs spike.
So the heating bill didn't just triple. The interest rate on the credit card they used to pay the heating bill also skyrocketed.
International credit ratings ultimately dictate domestic political realities. It completely erases a government's ability to deliver on populist promises.
That sudden erasure of a planned future, it's not just an economic phenomenon. We are seeing physical realities being permanently altered on the ground in the West Bank.
The violence there is accelerating rapidly. If we look specifically at a deadly shooting in the northern village of Tal, this marks the deadliest single incident there in months.
4 Palestinians, 3 of whom were from the same family, and 2 Israelis, 1 soldier and 1 security guard, were killed. And there are 2 entirely distinct, conflicting accounts of how this violence unfolded.
The divergence in the narratives is absolute. So, according to the Palestinian account, local residents say about 30 Jewish settlers attacked Palestinian homes early in the morning. This led to hand-to-hand clashes before Israeli soldiers arrived on the scene and began shooting.
While the Israel Defense Forces provide a completely conflicting sequence of events, the military states they responded to an uncoordinated hike by Israeli civilians who were then attacked by Palestinians.
According to the IDF, a security guard from a nearby outpost arrived. His weapon was snatched by a Palestinian who killed him, and then soldiers intervened, killing the shooter.
In an era where every public incident is filmed from multiple angles, how do institutions even establish a baseline of truth? The cell phone videos circulating from this event, they only capture chaotic fragments.
We have 2 short clips online showing armed men in civilian clothes, soldiers, and chaotic struggles for a weapon. But they entirely lack the broader context of how the confrontation actually began.
They are continually used to entrench opposing narratives rather than solve the mystery.
Well, the mechanism of social media fundamentally prevents the establishment of a baseline truth in conflict zones. People do not share a 20-minute video showing the slow buildup to a confrontation.
They clip the specific 10 seconds of violence that validates their pre-existing anger.
And an algorithm then feeds the Palestinian clip to one demographic and the IDF clip to another, meaning the 2 sides are literally consuming different historical realities.
The broader civic stakes here provide a pretty grim context. Since the Gaza war began in October 2023, 1,114 Palestinians and 41 Israelis have been killed in the West Bank.
Following this specific incident in Tal, the Israeli government issued a joint statement vowing to demolish the Palestinian shooter's home and speed up the legalization of unauthorized settler outposts in the area.
That battle over who gets to establish the baseline of truth through a smartphone screen, it is not just a fog of war problem in the Middle East. It is the exact same institutional struggle playing out right now in Washington, D.C.
President Trump recently appeared at the rescheduled White House Correspondents' Dinner, which was moved to the Waldorf Astoria following the April shooting incident at the Washington Hilton.
During his speech, the president honored the Secret Service officer who shot the April gunman, but the tone quickly shifted towards severe attacks on journalists.
He claimed attendees had Trump derangement syndrome, referred to the press as fake news, and joked about running for a 4th term in 2028.
The rhetoric at that dinner operates in tandem with concrete policy actions occurring at the exact same time. President Trump recently issued an executive order targeting the Smithsonian National Museum of American History.
The order directs the Department of Interior to place warning signs outside exhibits that the administration views as inaccurate or rooted in woke ideology and Marxism.
An accompanying White House statement accused the museum of veering toward extreme political activism designed to divide Americans.
This is a deliberate structural campaign to redefine American institutional memory and push the cultural boundaries of the presidency.
The contrast here is incredibly stark. You have a president standing at a gala, utilizing and praising the physical protection provided by the press corps security apparatus, while simultaneously working to dismantle the cultural and historical authority of the nation's premier research museum.
He is demanding physical security from the very institutions whose intellectual and historical independence he is actively attempting to erode.
The mechanism of placing a warning sign in a museum goes far beyond a simple plaque on a wall.
It creates an immediate chilling effect on curators and researchers. It signals to corporate sponsors and private donors that an exhibit is politically toxic, which directly threatens funding.
The Smithsonian operates 21 museums and draws tens of millions of visitors. By forcing warning labels onto historical exhibits, the administration is attempting to legislate how citizens perceive their own past.
When a government mandates what constitutes accurate history in a research museum, it fundamentally alters the public's relationship with objective truth and academic independence.
For more daily briefings, brain candy explainers, and classic audiobooks, visit clairenaratio.com. Returning to the theme of citizens confronting institutional power, we are seeing significant pushback across the United States against the massive resource drain of artificial intelligence.
New York has just become the first state to halt the construction of new, large-scale data centers for up to a year. And the civic stakes here are tied directly to physical resources.
A single data center uses evaporative cooling systems for massive server racks that can devour up to 5 million gallons of water daily. That is equal to the daily usage of a city of 50,000 people.
States with high concentrations of these centers have seen local electricity prices surge by up to 267% over the last 5 years.
The physical cost of AI is sparking local outrage, but the social application of this technology is generating far deeper ethical concerns.
In New York, the Salamanca High School, which is located on the Seneca Nation territory, is introducing a humanoid robot and AI teaching assistant named Sally.
The robot was purchased for nearly $58,000 from Realbotics. Notably, Realbotics recently purchased a company famous for manufacturing realistic sex dolls, marking a pivot for the firm into educational robotics.
The rollout has sparked intense backlash from the local teachers union and Native American residents.
The jump from manufacturing adult novelty items to programming the machine that teaches algebra to a 12-year-old is staggering.
There's a massive ethical chasm there.
Placing a machine built by a company with that specific corporate history into a classroom of children demands extreme skepticism.
And local residents, many of whom are members of the Seneca Nation, have explicitly stated they feel their children are being used as guinea pigs.
They point out the cruel historical irony of experimenting on Native American children, echoing the profound traumas of the Native American boarding school system where human connection and cultural identity were systematically stripped away.
The psychology of removing human connection in a classroom under the guise of personalized learning is what the teachers union is fighting against. They correctly identify this as the dehumanization of their profession.
This raises a pointed question about the ethics of tech companies bypassing local communities.
We're seeing these firms regularly utilize non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, with municipal officials to hide the scale of resource consumption for data centers.
The mechanism of the NDA forces local officials to sign away their rights to warn their own citizens about impending utility strains.
When a technology requires secrecy to be built and ignores historical community trauma to be deployed, it operates in direct opposition to local democratic consent.
When tech companies or governments try to bypass local consent, the pushback usually depends entirely on how visible the victims can make themselves.
We see this playing out vividly in India, where a highly unconventional movement has just achieved a massive political victory.
An online satirical movement known as the Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP, utilized an AI-generated cockroach mascot to channel widespread youth anxiety over chronic exam paper leaks and crippling unemployment.
What started as a digital joke evolved into a fierce 5-week protest in Delhi.
The pressure became so intense that it forced the resignation of Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, whose government rarely tolerates dissent, was forced to publicly promise the creation of fast-track courts.
The CJP movement represents a severe blow to Prime Minister Modi's carefully cultivated aura of invincibility, and the mechanics of why they chose a cockroach are brilliant.
The Chief Justice of India previously described some unemployed youth as cockroaches in an attempt to dismiss them.
The youth weaponized that insult. They used AI tools to quickly generate memes and videos, turning a reviled insect into a symbol of uncrushable persistence.
The algorithm favored the surreal, funny imagery, allowing them to gather 26 million followers on Instagram, completely bypassing traditional state-influenced media.
This was a masterclass in utilizing digital virality to force absolute, tangible government accountability.
We must contrast that highly visible viral victory in India with a hidden, ongoing human tragedy in the Caribbean.
The English-speaking Afro-descendant Racial people of San Andres and Providence are facing a devastating crisis.
These islands officially belong to Colombia, but they sit much closer to the coast of Nicaragua. Since September, U.S. military airstrikes targeting drug speedboats in the region have killed 215 people.
At least 16 local fishers from these islands have vanished since January.
The local population is living in absolute terror of going out to sea and being mistaken for traffickers by the U.S. military, which is severely impacting their traditional livelihoods.
These are fishermen. If they do not go out to sea, their communities starve.
The contrast between the youth in Delhi and the fishers in the Caribbean hinges entirely on visibility and the uneven application of justice.
The Indian protesters possess the digital literacy and numbers to hack the attention economy, making their grievances impossible to ignore.
The Rizal people, conversely, are geographically isolated and politically marginalized by both Bogota and Washington.
The U.S. Southern Command conducts these airstrikes with near total opacity, releasing minimal information about the victims or the rules of engagement.
The Colombian government has shown little interest in investigating the disappeared.
The Rizal fishers are victims of a distant policy objective, the U.S. war on drugs, executed with military force in their backyard.
Their isolation ensures their suffering remains largely invisible to the institutions dropping the bombs.
We have spent this time looking at how local actions trigger instant global consequences, and how visibility determines whether a community gets justice or gets ignored.
But looking at the sheer speed of these systems leaves you with a haunting question. As AI, algorithmic trading, and viral digital movements get faster and more intertwined, are we approaching a future where a political joke made in New Delhi instantly triggers a financial collapse in New York before a single human being can even intervene?
The gap between a local event and a global crisis is shrinking to zero.
Thank you for joining us. For more daily world briefs and classic audiobooks, visit claranarratio.com.